It had been more than 20 years since the last time I was in Sicily. My first visit was when I was just 11. And at the time, I was overwhelmed by Sicily. It was this grungy, intense place that I also remembered as being dry and barren. The beaches were dirty, and it was not terribly clean and not terribly welcoming. So it was with a bit of anxiety and kind of trepidation, actually, that when my parents proposed it, I somewhat reluctantly agreed to give it a go. But what greeted me was an incredible mixture of history, such as the Necropolis at Toluca, where there are more than 5,000 tombs from the 17th and 13th century BC carved into the mountainside. But more than that, I was also greeted by a countryside that was in bloom. Poppies and yellow flowers, purples. It was absolutely spectacular, particularly because we wound through the countryside looking for back roads and hidden beaches. The weather in the middle of May was, I don't know how else to put it, it was spectacular. The beaches were gorgeous, it wasn't too hot, it was welcoming. And to top it all off, we spent several days with Noto, the historic city, as our base. Not only was that historic city charming and beautiful and pristine, but beyond that, it was also a 2-day flower festival where they converted an entire road into these big, beautiful flower murals. From Noto, we set out and we explored the countryside. We cut inland and through back roads and hillsides and mountains and you name it. And eventually we found our way to Selinunte and their Greek ruins there. It had been home to a sprawling city of more than 30,000 people from 400 BC, which even to this day is still something that amazes me. From there it was on up to the Greek temple and the theater of Segesta. Now, the theater of Segesta, the amphitheater, looks out over the countryside and it provides these spectacular views where you can see all the way to the ocean. I can only imagine how dramatic and spectacular the view during a play would have been. From there it was on to the Villa Romana Casale at Piazza Armerina, a 4th century residential villa in Roman estate that has basically been perfectly preserved because a mudslide covered it up and it sat forgotten for a long time. From there, it was up into the mountains, up into the clouds, really, to Erice, the spectacular city that sits overlooking the valley below. Watching the clouds go by below us as we were surrounded by this stunning historic medieval town was, one of my favorite moments. Then, from there, we headed down to the Cathedral de Monreal, which is home to some of the most spectacular Byzantine-influenced mosaics I've seen anywhere outside of Hagia Sophia in Turkey, or in truth, probably more spectacular. Their joy and light and detail was something that brought a smile to all of our faces. But for me, one of the highlights had to be, of course, as a photographer, the Trapani salt flats in Marsala. These salt flats sit right outside the city, and I lucked out with the weather and the sunset, and it was spectacular. Truly some of my favorite photos I've taken in a long time. Not to mention one of the most just pristine and still and mesmerizing moments of the entire trip. So, Sicily, you shocked me, you impressed me, you wowed me, you dined me, you were wonderful, and I cannot wait to return.